conflict of interest. But I do look at all the reports as all the members of our committee. And it's been a real rewarding group to be part of. And so just to, okay, what's going on here? Okay, so the inspection committee, just a little bit of background, there's 15 members. Last year we did with over 32 inspections were conducted. And we've been doing this for over 25 years. I asked Violetta to kind of tell me when we first started. She wasn't sure, but I know back in the days when John Krepensek was kind of the only technical guy at TTMAC and the Guild, we used to get reports every year on the inspections that he did. And that was really about all there was. He was the one-man show. But now we offer it right across Canada. We are able to pretty well service everywhere. And we've got a really good level of knowledge because we have members from all parts of the industry, not just installers, but we also have manufacturers like myself. We also, have some technical people that have been around for a long time in different capacities. So it's quite a very knowledgeable and involved group. So what we do use when we write our reports and go into the examination of these failures, of course, this is our Bible, the 093,000 manual. This is the equivalent of the Tile Council of America's handbook. A while back, they approached me and they said, why don't you just use our handbook? And I said, well, first of all, how the heck do you use it? It's so bloody big, you can barely find anything in it. And number two, we do have exceptions to the rule than what they have. We do have some different small differences, and plus, we're a separate country. We feel that we want to have our own manual, and we are able to guide it into the right areas that we find are most prevalent in the Canadian tile industry. We also use now the Tile Installer Technical Handbook. This is relatively new and we are a little bit behind, but the good news is my promise to Violetta is to have this done by the end of the month. So I got basically till next week. The revisions for the 2000, I guess we'll call it 21, 22. But this is a nice addition, and you'll see I'll refer to it a few times in some of the failures that we're going to discuss, just so that you hopefully get familiar with it and realize that this is just as good a tool to use as the 093,000 manual. I think personally, it's actually even a better tool than the 093,000 manual for those installers. The 093,000 manual is more for the architectural community. This is specifically for the grassroots of our industry. The Tile Installer Technical Handbook, as it's called, addresses almost every possibility that you may come across in your everyday installations. We also, of course, refer to the different ANSI books. I won't read them out, but there's basically 4 that we're using now. And we also do refer to ISO. One big one is that we use ISO, not ANSI, for tile in the Canadian manual. And the main reason for it is we barely make any tile in Canada. The only tile manufacturer I'm aware of at the moment is Glass Tile through Interstyle in Vancouver. It should be non-proprietary, but I don't think that's a big deal since there's no other competitors. And then the 13007, we're in the process of recognizing and converting. We still use ANSI, but we are, we have side by side the the ISO equivalents, and that 13007 also covers waterproofing. There is a new standard coming out for the sheet waterproof membranes, 13007-6. It's just been ratified. Whether we will start, recognizing both at some point will probably be something we'll consider for the next revision. But we do recognize ISO because we are members. I actually used to chair, and now I was told I couldn't chair anymore because after 10 years, and I'd already done it 15 years, I was told I couldn't be chairman anymore. So now I got Ryan Fassand, which some of you may know from back in the day. He was recently with Dugan in Bella Bella, oh geez, I forget I'm gonna screw up the name.
Bella
Hopefully
Vita.
Dugan's not watching. What is it?
Bella Vita. And Ryan is online with us now.
Okay, well, good. So Ryan is now taking over as chairman, which is fantastic because he has another side of knowledge, which I don't really have a lot of, and that is the manufacturing side of tile. So we're in good hands, and we complement each other because we split the voting and work together on our committee. So the seminar topic is a little bit of a fun one for me because I've done it kind of before at one of the covering shows. Then I realized when I went to it and figured, oh, okay, I don't have to do much work. Oh my God, I needed to update the thing like crazy. But the one I did back in coverings a while back was kind of similar. And so I modified the name a little bit, but we call it Trials, Tribulations of Tile Failures in Canada. And this is where the fun part is. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So there's a little drum roll. I don't know if that came across. But these are the top 10 failures. Now, they're not numbered by the most important or most common because it changes. It's with 32 inspections, it's not a huge amount. I mean, it's probably more than we'd like to see. But these are the top 10. Now, when I started going through all my slides and putting it together, I realized that I could probably address 20 minutes on almost every one of these. So what I found is the last couple, I didn't bother adding the defective material, improper preparation. I figure that would be a round 2. I think we can do another one on this topic easily and maybe even have participation. I wouldn't mind having John Newell, for instance, maybe participate with me because he obviously very involved in our inspection committee and writes all the final reports. So now I don't know if you hear that. That's one of my favorite movies, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Can you hear the music? No? Well, unfortunately.
Yeah, you can, but it's very, very low in volume.
Yeah, and I don't know how to turn that up. So here, I'm sorry. Okay. That's not helping. So lack of coverage. This is one that we get a lot of. It's probably one of the biggest single causes of failure. This is actually one of the inspections I conducted. This is a chain restaurant that this installation was not even more than just about a year old. If you notice, they've got actually screws and washers holding this particular tile up, but there was even more scattered throughout the installation. And this is in the prairie, so obviously some extreme temperature fluctuations. And as you can see, the troweling technique was terrible. There was no back buttering. They swore they back buttered, but there was no back buttering, as you can see there. And there was just a multiple of other issues that were involved. But let me just go back again. Let's see. One of the things that we found too was that the backer board they used was not rated for exterior. It was a kind of a local manufactured board. And when we looked at the technical data sheet, it indicated it was not rated for exterior. So that was another big issue. The other problem was no movement joints initially. And then when they had the problems, when they found that the tile sounded hollow, they started cutting out the grout joints every 2 tile and caulking them, which, too little, too late. And my understanding was they more or less had to take the whole installation apart and redo it, which is really sad because chances are this particular chain will probably never use this particular larger format tile, at least in these installations. And they had one particular location in Vancouver that was done with the exact same tile, but because it was done correctly, it has performed 100%. And this one here, well, you can see that tile wasn't installed on gravel or river rock. It was over here on the concrete, and you notice that you know, the coverage was absolutely miserable. No back buttering. Really not the right tile being used outside as well. I mean, that's the thing about failure, is that you normally can't just point to one thing. You'll see I have some reports where I've identified what we use as a conclusion. And you'll see we don't usually point just to one thing. We normally have a multiple of reasons why something failed. So normally in many cases, it's not a simple fix. In many cases, it's almost all, well, I wouldn't say always, but in a lot of cases, they may have to replace the whole installation. So in this particular case here, you know, this is where the 093 manual comes in. Is what we do is we take the information right out of the handbook and we cut and paste, we put it in there so that there's absolutely no question. It's not, you know, unsubstantiated. We have in there, and I highlighted it in red because just to stand out, that, you know, exterior, you have to back butter, or now what they're going to be calling it is back flat troweling or back notch troweling, because that's in different geographical locations of the country, and especially United States, they do those two different techniques, and everybody else was just calling it back buttering. So we are going to be changing or adding that to our manual for the next revision, but right now we call it back buttered, which covers both. The other one that we see that's really unbelievable, we see it more and more, is spot bonding. This is why we went to color in the 093,000 manual for the last revision, is so that the photos justified themselves. In black and white, they don't show very well. This is something we see all the time. And what's even more frustrating is that you get these guys telling us that they've been doing it for 25 years and never had a problem. I don't know why it is 25 years, but whenever there's a problem, you talk to a contractor who's had a failure. Well, I've been doing it like this for 25 years, not 10, not 12, 25. But anyways, this is something we see all the time. It's just not a good installation. We even had one that was very concerning. This one here was a school in Ontario, and they spot bonded, and those tiles, if they were to come down, and I forget whether this was a high school or a junior, sorry, a senior or junior. Well, I don't know in Ontario if they got both. Where I'm from, we had both. But a small child could be hurt pretty seriously or killed if one of those tiles were to fall off. As a matter of fact, I think we put, or had them put caution tape up all around until they took them down and reinstalled them properly. So people ask, well, where does this come from? And the only thing I can figure, and I think a few of us have kind of gave our opinions on this in our committee, is it must be maybe going back to, you know, stone installations. In our dimension stone manual, you know, if you look, what we're showing here is we're using rapid or fast set plaster over top of the anchoring bolts, and then there's still pig wire or non-ferrous wire that is used, you know, to make sure that the load of the weight of the, in this case, stone is held, and there's no way for that stone piece to fall off the wall. On walls and on floors for tile, the spot bonding is something that is just not recommended anywhere. We you know, believe that it just almost uncertainty is going to have just a matter of time before it's going to fail. Then if you have any other things involved too, if you have moisture, for instance, well, of course, you got nothing but hollow cavities where water can collect. Load bearing capability is questionable. Shrinkage of the mortar itself, because a lot of times they don't use, say, a large and heavyweight mortar, which is made so it can be used in it, like an ANSI 118.15 mortar. Well, all the standards now have that allowance for large and heavyweight mortar. But they don't have the shrinkage issues. But a lot of them use thin set. They'll use regular thin set, which normally shouldn't be built over 1/4 of an inch. and you get excessive shrinkage. Never mind that you're going to have the floor all of a sudden that was nice and flat, all of a sudden have waves in it, but also it's going to be basically almost a sure thing. It's going to debond, and you're going to have issues with load bearing capability. So another ugly installation is workmanship, and I had a little bit of a chuckle here. The floor on the left, obviously excessive lippage, and why is, well, they didn't follow the 50% offset very well that we recommend. Plus the tile, it looks like it has some pretty excessive warpage for the lippage that they got going on there. The one on the right, that's the only indication of one of my products, but I had to laugh because this contractor sent us a picture saying, what do you think of this install? They hammered a bunch of nails to as spacers to hold the tile up, like a ledger on the bottom there, as well throughout the rest of the tile. And I would imagine the waterproof membrane might be slightly violated. So I wanted to make sure people realize that in the back of the 093,000 manual, we do have our master spec. This is done by Keith Robinson from Design Log, I believe, in Edmonton. One of the top spec writers in North America. He's won awards for his spec writing. We've been very lucky that he's been able to help us in revising our master spec every time we revise our manual. But there again, you know, it calls out, you know, that you have to follow ANSI 108 guidelines, the general guidelines, and he calls out for examination all the intricate aspects of the installation. Another one that we see a lot of problems, a lot of the installations, unfortunately, is there is either no movement joints or lack of movement joints. This has become such a serious problem that in the town council, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, the cover was the first detail was of their what they call expansion joint detail, not movement joints. And when I've sat in their committee, I've advised them, why don't you make it movement joints, the generic term for all the joints, rather than just expansion joints? Fell on deaf ears. But they call theirs EJ, I want to say 301. But we see no movement joints a lot, or very few, lack of movement joints. This here was a shot from an installation that our company was involved in after the fact. And it was actually a church near Quebec City. They were removing the pews for the first time in a long time. And literally the tile just erupted and blew off the floor. There's other photos that unfortunately I couldn't find that show the pews off the corner, and you can see a kind of a further span shot, and it looks like the ocean. You got these waves and waves of tile that buckled when they removed the weight off of the floor with the pews. Now I wanted to show you this, just as kind of, you can see a few of these on Facebook. Come on. So I'm going to stop it there because it doesn't show much more after that video. But there's I've counted at least 6 different of these type of videos showing tile exploding off the floor. Now, it's not necessarily just because there is no movement joints, but you could be pretty rest assured that they've hard grouted everything to the walls. There is no movement joints within the actual field tile itself. But there's also other conditions too. Some of the videos I saw was that there was extreme temperature changes in I believe one of the Caribbean islands. So they were blaming it a lot more on the change in the temperature, and that the wood and the tile were expanding and contracting at a different rate, which of course they will. Thus, they should be thinking about, obviously they should be having proper movement joints in there, but maybe using, an uncoupling or a crack isolation membrane to help make sure that this type of failure won't occur. So we do have our 301 MJ, which new that we've added is we now recognize, because this is an ANSI now, is to have non-linear movement joints. It's something that for the longest time we never recognized as an industry, both in US and Canada. Now we do recognize it. Intensive testing and research was done more by Tile Council, and they now do allow it. The only thing is, what we've recommended is that a crack isolation membrane be used just to ante up the possibilities to allow for some movement, a little bit more movement than having the tile rigidly bonded directly to the substrate. This is something the United States is not doing at the moment, but I have indicated that we've done this, and they are going to consider that maybe for their next revision for their handbook. Inappropriate material used. This is an installation in Ontario, Chinese slate. It was installed in an area in the northern part of, the north of Toronto, where the cottage country, and probably never seen a freeze and thaw cycle in its life. And the material literally just, I think it was only a few years of install where it literally has broken down to the point you see it here. They also had a few other issues, negative slope occurring. Water was not draining away from the building, so that didn't help out as well. But wrong material. They shouldn't be using this in a northern environment like this, where we have freeze thaw, multiple freeze thaw cycles nowadays. This is another one that's bluestone, which you see a lot in the southern part of the United States, or interior maybe, but interior of homes or offices, what have you. This was outside in, I believe in Kitsilano Beach. And the stone, every time there was a rain storm, would start darkening in the middle as it it totally turned dark, and then it would slowly dry out. And of course, it would stay dark in the middle till it finally dried out completely, if it had a long enough drying period to allow for that. Really not the proper product for an area where you get a lot of rain, like the West Coast. And also this install being on a mud bed, what they could have done to help themselves, they could have used, as we have in our exterior details 325 ED, they could have gone in with say a drain mat underneath the mortar bed on top of the waterproofing to accelerate the water from not having itself sit in that stone for long periods of time. Obviously, that also could create a concern. Maybe in Vancouver it's very not so common, but if there's a freeze and thaw cycle, obviously that can cause even more concerns that stone may start scaling and breaking down. So, unsuitable materials. I brought this up just so you're aware that we do have this in the manual. In this case, we're dealing with substrates. And so we do have a whole list of unsuitable substrates to bond to. This is not only now in the 09-3000 manual, but this was lifted out of our ceramic tile installation handbook, the technical handbook I mentioned earlier. And then you got these, which are questionable substrates that we have listed as well. So another common failure we see a lot of is lippage. And John, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to take those reports. You mentioned that we had some good shots. I had these. I took off of actually right out of our handbook for the ceramic tile installer. But there you can see, obviously, there's some pretty bad lippage there, almost to the point of being a tripping hazard. This is not the same photo from earlier, just another one that we had on file. But again, you know, the hazards of not really following the fifth. Well, this is 50% here and maybe 1/3 here, but still some excessive lippage. We do have in the manual the guidelines for lippage. And you have to take in consideration also the allowable inherent warpage of the tile itself. So you take that in consideration along with your measurement when you do your measurement of the tile as well. And new this year, we did put in gauged porcelain, which it has a pretty very minimal allowance for lippage, and rightly so, because being so thin, typically the gauged porcelain, one of the most, I guess you would say, vulnerable portions of the tile is the edges, and lippage is just a disaster for gauged porcelain. They chip very easily and break down very quickly if there's a lot of damage to the edge. Another application, exterior application. I had it in plural, and I decided to change it to singular because there is some good exterior applications, but it is an extremely challenging situation. You know, this is on one of the Gulf Islands. Actually, it's one of the MP's home in Vancouver, and or I'm sorry, out of Victoria, I guess. And from this side, it doesn't maybe look too bad, but if you look, you can see some of the issues here. But efflorescence was just absolutely incredible that occurred here, and we're not quite sure why it was so bad. If you take a look, I mean, it really was coming out all over the outer edges of the balcony. There was a hot tub below, I believe, and it was staining the cover of the hot tub. You can see the surface below here is being stained by it as well. I think that's stamped concrete. And this is another installation. This is in Florida, where every single year they go out and they get a pressure washer to clean off the stalactites that are developing on the outer edge of the balcony from the excessive efflorescence that they're getting. Almost every manufacturer I know will show on their bag in limitations that if it's a cementitious based product, that they cannot completely control efflorescence, that it's an inherent characteristic to any cementitious product. There are some products out there that say that they are almost efflorescence free, but depending on the situation, unless some of the technologies changed recently, but you can't be 100% guaranteed. Even if you do everything right, tent things up, keep the heat up properly, put heaters in, make sure it doesn't get subjected to moisture for a long period of time. Depending on the manufacturer of the mortar, they may say, you know, 72 hours, some may say 7 days or 10 days. But the reality is efflorescence is something we have to kind of live with in our industry, and you just try and control it. They control it here by going in and sandblasting or pressure washing, I imagine, the surface every year. Here's another one. This is absolutely dismal efflorescence going on. And this was an interesting one. I actually took these photos. This, I believe, was latex coming up. It was on the it was in Minnesota, and right on the water. And literally, when the sun came out and hit the tile, these bubbles would come up, and you would get this like little bit of foam coming up. And once the sun went around the corner, then it would, basically dry up, as you can see some of the residue there. And it continued on for several months. Then eventually, I believe it did finally pilfer out, and it's not happening anymore. But that's another issue, especially if the mortar never has enough chance to cure before it gets wet. It can remulsify and create some of these issues. This is another exterior application. This is a chalet up at Whistler, and this is pretty funny because if you can see the patio doors or French doors there are flush with the stone, and the owner was absolutely adamant. He did not want to drop the deck down and have a proper flashing so that water couldn't get through. He was adamant that there was a maintenance guy who would be there every day to push the snow away or any puddling of water so that the water would never get inside the chalet. I don't have photos to show you the inside, but water did go in and cause damage to the hardwood floors that were on the other side. And even more so of a concern was underneath. They had efflorescence going on. And if you look at the beams, they put backer board down on top of this plank, and they thought they were doing a good thing to make it invisible. They put tar paper down underneath it. And so that tar paper, because it's getting water infiltration from the sides, because the flashing was not working, or there was no flashing, I should say, the water was getting through, coming in, leaching the tar paper, and then they had themselves one heck of a mess. All the they had again a jacuzzi here with a cover, a hot tub with a cover, and expensive patio furniture that was stored off to the side, and they were damaged by the infiltration of water here. So one thing that is a really good checklist that we have is the technical handbook for the tile contractor. We have this section, it's 2 pages long, basically going through all the concerns and check marks that you need to put down on that you are able to satisfy before you should even think about tackling an exterior application. It's something that our company, we do for exterior. We actually have a checklist similar to this that we send out to any contractor that's interested in using one of our systems for exterior, and they got to check it off and sign it and fax it or scan it to us before we even get involved in discussing it with them. So it's probably one of the most challenging installations next to steam rooms, which is a topic I probably should have thrown on here, but next time. But it is definitely, all you gotta do, corner, miss one specific aspect of any of these requirements that are listed, and you're gonna have yourself not only a failure, but in some cases, catastrophic failure. We've had a few failures, I'm not gonna lie, and a couple of them have been well into like $100,000 in repair, in cost to repair. This one here was really scary. This is the porcelain panel / slabs. These were truly panels, or what they call gauge porcelain. This is in the middle of the prairies where they get some pretty excessive freeze and thaws, and this installation was just a disaster. Solid backing should be concrete or masonry. Concrete board or masonry. Plywood. The membrane they used was not even rated to be used on plywood, this waterproof membrane they applied. Look at the troweling techniques. I mean, obviously not even close to what's recommended just for regular large format tile, but if you're familiar with these porcelain panels, typically you comb out your mortar with a back notch trowel on the back of the tile, and then notch it on the substrate, all in the same direction, and then you lay it down, and it's called like a zipper lock to lock the mortar in. So you make sure you get basically 100% coverage, but also, of course, most importantly, that it's going to hold the tile, especially on a vertical application. Now, this tile was 3.5 millimeter, and it had a resin back or polyester back to it. But it was an absolute disaster. They had sections that were the tile literally had fallen off. Again, there's the mortar. The mortar was extremely brittle. We don't think it probably was hoarded at all or tented so that it would be protected. And it was a two-man crew. A two-man crew. How do you lift up these large porcelain tiles? When I did our front entranceway to our building in Montreal, I had 6 guys, with the proper equipment to lift these tiles up 1 meter by 3 meter to be able to place them down on our walkway going into our building. These were only 2 guys. I mean, maybe they're big, strong Italian or Polish guys or whatever, but it makes you wonder. Obviously, they didn't follow any of the recommendations by the porcelain panel manufacturers. Like, well, I won't go into their names, but you all know them. But it was, they literally had to take everything down, and they then searched for a proper installer who had said, oh, we've done this before, and gave them one referral, but I think they probably had the tailgate warranty going on and they were never seen again. So if you are dealing with a larger format tile, and this goes with any tile, we do have in our, again, technical handbook, the drawings showing what we do in print on how you should trowel in one direction with your trowel, not swirls, and take your tile and go perpendicular to it and push it in. Now with the large gauge porcelain, you can't do that. On a wall, you're supposed to use like an orbital sander to try and make sure it embeds into the bond coat. Or on the floor, it's pretty funny. I think they even got videos now showing it. They got what I call the porcelain panel shuffle. And you got a guy who starts out in the middle and he shuffles to the left, to the right, up 1 step, and to the left, to the right. And then they still, in some cases, will use the orbital sander to make sure that they get proper coverage and contact with the mortar. But again, we've got some really good information in both in the 093,000 manual as well as the technical handbook. Again, this here, the tile's not coming down yet, but you can see that there's some efflorescence, and I'm not sure if Will White's on the phone. I'm sorry, on the call, but Will White was on the committee that created now the newest standard for porcelain panels / slabs for exterior vertical installations. But if I'm not mistaken, and I was trying to reread it before the webinar today, and I didn't find it, but I believe the maximum size is 1 meter by 1 meter on vertical. Maybe when we finish here, if Will's on, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But obviously they've gone with full panels here. They sounded hollow throughout, and my understanding was they all eventually had to come down. Here you can see they literally pulled the tile off with their hand. And then in there you can see again the coverage is dismal. Thank God it was a home out on its own, totally isolated. So if anyone was going to get hurt, it would be only the owner's family or whatever, which I'm not wishing upon. But thankfully, there was no pedestrians that could have been harmed by this. So here you can see this is actually an installation. I believe this is actually down in Tennessee. One of the manufacturers of these tiles is doing a demo. And if you notice, the mortar is troweled in one direction, and they're going widthwise with the notches, which makes more sense because it's a lot less further for the air. When those notches collapse, the air can then get faster to the outer edge. If they went the other way, good luck on trying to get all the air out of the thin set of the notches when it's been laid down onto the corresponding notch trowel mortar on the substrate. But this is how you normally should be installing these large porcelain panels. In our conclusion, we did call out that, and this goes back, it was around 2017, I think, when this failure was investigated. But we did call out that you cannot go over plywood. It's an absolute no-no on exterior applications, even interior applications. I would not install tile onto a wood vertical application because a lot of times it's in areas where there's moisture, or maybe it's an exterior wall where you're going to have temperature fluctuations, things of that nature. We again, every single report, we always make it de facto by referring to, oh, there's a spelling mistake, installed, huh? That there's no recourse by the installer to say that, you know, we'd have nothing to back up what we're concluding. So there is now a new standard for doing exterior applications, which I mentioned. Will White, I believe, has joined us. And this standard, I believe, is even in print. I think you can buy it now, and it comes out with the 108.19, then you got the 108.20, and then the 132.3, which is the standard for the performance of the tile. They're all in one handbook, or I should say manual now with ANSI, and you can buy that from Tile Council's website. And that's the 108.19. I should have had them in reverse order, but it came out in 2017. Now, one thing I did want to call out is that 108.19 is for interior. And we currently in Canada, unlike the US, do not recognize gauged porcelain panels on wood substrates. Never mind vertical, but on a floor. The main reason for it is that we still haven't done enough testing. And the way they test for this product was they used the Robinson floor test, the ASTM C627. And what they do is they actually have a concrete pad. They take wood 2x2s or 2x4s. They install a 1/4 inch piece of plywood on the bottom and screw it in from the bottom. They put their subfloor, which in the United States is more than ours, on 16-inch on center, 400 millimeters on center. They install 3/4, 20 millimeter. That's their building code. We install 15 millimeter. So right there, we have an issue. And when they do the install, they put that pad, which is 4 foot by 4 foot, on top of that concrete pad, so it's fully supported. And then they do the Robinson floor test. This is really how a test should be done. This is an old shot I did of a long span back when TT Mac was still with the Guild. And this is really the only way we think that we're going to be able to determine whether gauged porcelain should be recommended on a wood substrate. I am in the process of creating a committee through ASTM C21. We are going to do long span suspended wood frame construction. And my goal is that we will probably, at one point, once it's been ratified and everything goes well, we'll submit it as being the new way to test any type of installs over wood, that it be suspended and be a long span. This is the only way you're going to get the true deflection, true twisting action of the joists, vibrations, you know, all the multiple of stresses that a suspended wood frame construction is going to actually inflict on an actual tile installation. Optical hazing, I threw that in there. It's something that we have been seeing on occasion. It's usually from the polishing of these tiles. Now, just so you know, in Tennessee, in Crossville, there's 2 new factories or additions to factories that are strictly for polishing porcelain. Polished porcelain has got a huge market and a growth factor, and it's something you got to be careful for. It's part of the polishing process. You get these swirls, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't go in and then try and regrind it. It's impossible. It really lends itself nicely. There you can see it very clearly here. But you usually don't see it unless the light is the right way. So we really emphasize when it comes to these polished porcelains, mock-ups. Again, in master spec, we do call out that you know, the mock-up should be used. You know, that's more for commercial. But when you're doing a residential home, and if they're spending all that money on these gorgeous polished porcelain large format tile, you want to get a mock-up. You want to get it with the skylight coming through or the westerly sunlight coming through, and making absolutely sure you don't have this issue. So we've talked about the bad, we've talked about the ugly. How about the good? So I threw in some of these award winners. And again, you probably didn't hear that. I had clapping going on, a little audio special effect. But these are some of the pictures of some of our hard service award winners. Absolute stunning installations. This was the transit station in Toronto. I could have put a whole bunch more, but as you can see, we're almost running out of time here. It's 1:54. Couple of residential shots. I believe these were also hard service awards. Last final comment before we can try and do a few questions, and I'm willing to stay past 2 o'clock, is we do two types of testing. I've kind of alluded to the Robinson floor test. We also do the BOT 3000E for DCOF. I should have put that in there in the title. DCOF, that's dynamic coefficient of friction. And new this year is, well, we started at the end of last year, but new this year, because it's now official in the standard, the newest standard on DCOF, A326.3, we now do field testing. Right now, currently, we've only done field testing in Toronto. We have one individual that's very well versed on it now. And eventually we'll probably have a few more across the country that will be well versed on doing this. Our goal is to try and get large traffic areas like box retailers, hospitals, malls to hire our service so that they can verify maybe once a year that the high traffic entranceways and things of that nature still comply with the 0.42 wet requirement that is called out by ANSI 326.3. The Robinson floor test, I mentioned, I alluded to, we can do it both on concrete or wood frame and also suspended wood frame. Just get in contact with Violetta. I know we've done quite a few this year, or sorry, last year, and we're hoping to do the same this year. We have the only one that's being used by an independent lab in North America. United States Tile Council has a universal floor tester, but they still don't operate it for whatever reason. But we operate it. That's the only one we have, and we operate it as diligently as we can. There we go. So I'd like to thank you. I'm willing to take some questions. I don't know whether some people had entered some on the chatter box. Violetta, if you want to.
Okay, so I've got a question, a direct question from Michael Wheeler, who says mosaics that have mesh where the glue is water soluble, they come apart when they get wet. Manufacturers tell me it's okay to use it in a shower. Is it okay?
For wet areas like a shower, no. We do call out, there is a section on mosaic tile and recommending that they be mesh mounted on the face, and also that the manufacturer warranties it for wet areas. One real easy thing to do is take a sheet of it and throw it in a bucket of water and see what happens. A lot of times, if it's not appropriate for a shower, you're going to find that it emulsifies the glue and it comes off. But the other problem you have with these mesh mounted tile is there's a lot of overspray on the glue, and it really makes it so you're really not getting much contact of the mortar to the back of the tile. You're not even getting close to 80%, for a dry area. But in a wet area, you want 95 to 100%, which in most cases you're just not going to accomplish with these mesh mounted mosaics.
Okay. Next one is from Corey, and he's asking you, what are your thoughts on leveling clips?
Leveling clips are, I think, here to stay. I also think they're a little bit overused. I'm sitting in my new office at home, and I had a 18 by 18 tile, and I used the leveling clips, and to be honest, I found them a little cumbersome, and I don't think I really gained a whole lot. If anything, I lost a lot of time using them. But I think for the larger format tiles, and of course with the gauge porcelain panels, they are required. The lippage control clips are an absolute must. They are a savior there because it really helps you to adjust the adjacent tile to the next one. But there's a need for them, and don't go too crazy with them because they don't necessarily help you in all situations. There was a concern, and I don't know if you remember, Violetta, I had Johnny put some clips together for me, and I did a 2x2 porcelain, and I made sure the clips were right, the legs of the clips were right underneath the wheel path. And we ran, I think, 2 tests and absolutely no problems. That was always my concern, was that the legs, because some of them don't have a lot of opening for the mortar to come through, might act as a bit of a bond breaker or reduce the transfer of load. Those 2 tests, and I did talk to a lot of manufacturers in Chersai in Italy over the years, they say it's not an issue. So I like them, but I don't think you have to use them all the time.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Christian Probe, and he says, "Hi Dale, thank you for giving us your time and knowledge today. I have a project I'm trying to discern. 3/4 TNG over 2x10s feels solid. My plan is an uncoupling membrane, Curdy fabric to TNG subfloor, heated floor mat, then self-leveler and 12x24 porcelain tile. Is there a more economical or better way to do this?"
Oh boy, I mean, that's a kind of a complicated answer, or different variables that maybe need to be looked at. If you look on the screen, my email is there. I'd rather field a few more other questions. That one's a little bit more involved. And also there's a little bit of a question mark because he called out Curdy, and Curdy's not an uncoupling membrane. Dietra is, but maybe that's just a mistake. But I think better, why don't we talk after? That's going to be a little bit more involved.
Okay.
Next other questions?
Next question, yeah, is from Brent Fisher. Dale, you said that TT Mac recommends a 50% offset, but in actual fact, I think our manual warns against it, as tile quality seems to be a growing issue. Your photo showed what appeared to be a 1/3 offset, which is what we recommend to customer for running bond applications. Can you comment on this?
Yeah, I to be honest, was somewhat horrified when I looked at it. I mean, I thought superficially when I was looking at different photos I had that most of them were a 50% offset, so that kind of explained it. Especially when they're large rectangular tiles. When you do a 50% offset, you've got the high point of the middle of that rectangular tile in the middle, and then you've got the lowest point of the next adjacent tile. So that's why you always got such excessive lippage. Some of those photos I had were, like I said, some were a combo. They were 50 and 1/3, but even the 1/3 obviously had some issues. So again, that's where I think mock-ups are really important. Especially if it's a large commercial job, and also to let you know, part of this would be also to measure the tile to make sure what the variation in the dimensions are. And Will White, who's, again, I'm not sure if he's on the call, but he's from the US. Me and him sit on several committees together. He sits on some of mine, I sit on his. And one of the ones he's working on is a 2-page white paper on how to measure the tile in the field to make sure that you're within the ANSI tolerances of, say, ANSI 137.1, so that you've already looked at that before you installed it. Because the warpage of the tile, if it's exceeding what we've got in our chart, then you obviously got a big problem, because it doesn't matter how well you installed that tile, the lippage is going to be excessive, and it's not going to meet the standards.
Yeah, Dale, do you mind if I just comment on that?
Sure.
So anyway, we do have it appears in our manual, in our 093,000 manual, where we discuss and I can't remember what section it shows up, but it does show up there, and it's just kind of like a one single line or two line or a paragraph in there that suggests that we no longer recommend a 50-50 offset. And the reason why we don't recommend that 50-50 offset, and this is my theory, and any other contractors that want to jump in and comment, feel free to do so, is that I'm just thinking that with the tile market being so competitive, and of course you've got, obviously a big chunk of it in Asia that's put the pressure on the European markets. I'm of the opinion that the quality control today, due to that competition, just doesn't really allow for us to get a nice flat tile, and this crowning that we see on a regular basis is here to stay. I just don't see it changing. The 1/3 offset actually mitigates it a little bit, although you showed a diagram with a 1/3 offset that was still a disaster. Yeah. So I mean, it's not going to work in every particular instance. But what I would like to see for the guide moving forward is maybe to put that 50-50 offset clause that we have in the manual, maybe up front and center a little bit, maybe not have it buried somewhere, and put some more emphasis on this, because what we're finding is the architects out there, they don't acknowledge that we don't recommend the 50-50. They're still speccing it all the time, and us contractors are fighting it and fighting it and fighting it on a regular basis, because the crowning is an issue with anything that's 12 by 24 and up, in my opinion.
Well, especially with rectangular tile, it's almost impossible for them to be able to keep it flat when they manufacture, because you've got the length and the width that are different in proportion. And so Mother Nature likes to, when it's manufacturing, when it's cooling and it's shrinking, even if it's we're talking thousands of an inch, whatever. Because a longer length than the shorter length, you're always going to have a little bit of warpage. It's Mother Nature. So you're probably right, Brent. We probably won't ever see it where it's 100% flat, especially the larger rectangular type tile. And the 1/3, just to let you know, that came from Dale Tile. Dale Tile started bringing that up in the United States, and then they brought it to Tile Council, and Tile Council said, "Hey, is everybody else on board with this?" And all the other tile manufacturers that participate in the handbook said, "Oh yeah, we agree." So that's where that came from. It came from a tile manufacturer that was having, obviously Dale Tile being a very big manufacturer, they were having issues, and they were adamant that this had to be recognized and put in the handbook. But yeah, we can do that. We can maybe if anything, now that we're in color, we can do some photos as well. Some of the ones I just showed you to show the hazards of doing a 50% and even the 1/3 offset, and say, look, just because you did 1/3 doesn't mean you don't do due diligence and verify that the tile, take random tile at different boxes and determine that they meet the ANSI requirements for warpage.
Yeah, no, I think we need to push that a little bit forward, because the architects out there, we just see these 50-50 running bonds all the time in the specs, and the architects don't seem to recognize that it's a problem. Yeah.
Even the European manufacturers are putting it in their literature and on their samples not to do a 50-50 offset and go to a 70-30 or a 1/3 offset.
Yeah. It helps. It helps a lot, actually.
Yeah. Any
All right,
other
thank you.
questions?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, there are more questions. Yeah. Next one is from Simon Pond, who, by the way, is one of our newest members. Welcome, Simon. Question of how companies, sorry?
I said, whoop, whoop.
Okay. Question of how companies handle liability around waterproofing shower pans. I'm thinking in terms of high rise. We are a company, often we're using piece workers. They're independent contractors who typically wouldn't carry more than 1 million in liability insurance. Our company insurance won't cover subs. It's my understanding this is typical. I've never had any serious problems, but my concern is water damage 17 floors up in a high-end building in downtown Vancouver could cause millions in damages. Can you comment on this?
Well, I mean, that's a big topic. I mean, there's different ways to tackle it, but I guess probably the simplest way to look at it, and this is something we struggle as a manufacturer, is that if you're going to do a shower system, determine which manufacturer that you like the best and that they've got all the components that you need to do a proper installation, and then check their warranty. Make sure that their warranty is more than just materials, that it's labor and materials, and how long their warranty is. Certain manufacturers may only be 10. In our case, we offer like a lifetime warranty if it's all our components are used. Now, if you substitute, and this is where we have a problem. I've had this happen. One of the big towers in Vancouver, the contractor decided to use our shower pans and our waterproofing on the bottom, and then used another person's waterproofing on the walls. I had no issue with the other manufacturer. The problem is liability. Who's he going to point to if it starts leaking? You know, if it started to fail, you know, I had a sneaking, not sneaking suspicion, but I had a way, if that really did come about, I would go and do a water test, and I would plug the drain and bring the water up to where the top of the threshold is. And if it didn't leak, I'll say, well, guess what? The leak's got to be in the wall. Go see XYZ manufacturer. But finger pointing, big problem. I would strongly recommend go with one manufacturer that has all the different components, so that you have a one source installation, so that you're not going to have this finger pointing. I mean, companies like myself and other of the manufacturers out there, I know Mapei, FlexTile, Custom, all those big manufacturers, reputable companies, typically have all the components so that you can do a good installation, that the liability is not being held by you. It's going to be held by the manufacturer. Obviously, as long as you install it properly.
Hey, Simon, there was
Simon.
in our AGM where we had the contractors forum, this was a major topic that we felt that we would, if we're meeting again in June at Whistler, that in our contractor forum, that we would try to address that, because it's not just for something like a shower. You got in commercial, you got major possibilities of liability, right? So it's something that other contractors are actually asking about too.
Yeah, right. And I typed in another follow-up question to that. Is just say the plumber's, you know, a shower pan passes the water test, you know, that the plumbers do, whatever, and then at some point in the future the thing fails, just that the plumbers are not on the hook ultimately for our shower pans. I just want to know that I have that correct.
Yeah, I mean, then it's a question of calling up the manufacturer of the system you used and have them come in and do you know, an evaluation. And maybe they're probably going to have to maybe take a few things apart to see what's going on. But you know, you know, we get called on those on occasion, and usually what it ends up being is that another trade got on the waterproofing, put a hole in it by accident. No one said anything. It all goes to like proper protection of the floor, of the shower floor. When you finish, you put cardboard or plywood down to make sure that no other trades are going to violate it. But it's not a simple thing, obviously. And you know, we you know, for our company, you know, we always try to make a negative into a positive. So we go to the installation in question and go through all the aspects that we are of the installation, and then try and find the final problem and then solve it. And that's, from our side, that's what how we proceed with it. But it's a good question, Craig. Maybe that's a topic we could have a joint meeting together and discuss it, you know, suppliers and contractors.
Yeah, that's the AGM.
Yeah.
No, but actually, even beyond the AGM, as we're looking forward, sorry for interrupting, guys. I'll just introduce myself. My name's, because my name on my thing doesn't tell you who I am, but I'm Brent Fisher. I'm the sitting president with TT Mac. What I'd like to see is this is enough for us to have one of these sessions on alone, actually, and talking about, using single source systems. This whole rubber shower pan thing has been an issue for everybody that's done any kind of multifamily. Has been faced with the rubber shower pan scenario, the do's and the don'ts, and the fact that you have no choice but to mix manufacturers' products to accomplish that. It's a big problem, and of course, I'm sure Dale would love to talk about this even more, because you guys have been pushing your systems for years and years and years. There's competitive products in the marketplace that do perform similar functions to what Schluter shower systems do. But man, you're right. The 17th floor of a high rise and some water that gets away from you, those are big dollars.
Well, just to let you know, there was a famous hotel, I won't say who, in Las Vegas, and there was a manufacturer from our industry that provided all the waterproofing, and it failed miserably. Water was running down the hallways, and it's a few years ago now, but I think about 10 years ago. And last count I heard through one of my contacts who works for the company, they were over $10 million in liability. That's how much they've been paid.
Well, that's what I mean. So I'd like to think in the future, Craig, just thinking forward to tile tech conversations moving forward, this could be a topic on its own, actually.
Way to go, Simon. You bring up
Well, that's okay. We're looking for some content we can sink our teeth into, and this one we could really sink our teeth into this. Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Coming from Vince Lamont, I believe. Thank you, Dale. Installation on an existing sand bed. How can we provide installation warranty when there is no way to verify how sound the substrate is, especially when the removed tile was well bonded?
Yeah, mortar beds, obviously they fall underneath ANSI 108.1 A, B, and C. You've got cured, you've got wet set, and then you got not bonded, I think. I forget the three. There's three different ones that under ANSI. And the stronger they are is by how much you compress it. The harder you compact it, the stronger the mortar bed becomes. But of course, that's done manually. So to measure it is kind of subjective. So it's a hard one. To be honest, though, the good news is that we don't see it very often. Very few mortar beds now are being done, and the ones that are being done typically last. They're still one of the best, installation methods if you can do it, or if you can allow for the weight and height increase that you occur with it. But something like that, again, this is where our inspection committee comes in. You may want to bring in one of our inspectors to come in and, in there I would definitely, normally we don't tear tile out, but in an installation like that, we do have release papers that can be signed, and we will take out a tile and take a look at what's going on underneath, and maybe even take a core sample and determine that core sample. There we can get a little bit of compression results, and also get a better idea of the composition and what have you. But yeah, that one, if that's something that you've just experienced, Vincent, I would strongly recommend getting one of our inspectors. And in your neck of the woods, it'd probably be Jim Manella. And there's a guy who knows mortar beds better than anybody.
I'll get John Newland.
Or John Newland. Unfortunately, I don't think John did a lot of mortar beds.
Okay, so Vince, you wanna ask
Something else,
the second
Violetta?
part of your question?
Yes, a few years back, something came up and I never got really the answer to my question. And it was should the control joints be closer than 2400 when a 2x2 mosaic tile is being used with epoxy grout? Meaning that when you start compounding those 1/4 of an inch grout joints into 8 feet, well, it starts to be a lot of epoxy, and that porcelain tile can explode. And I'm there, I understand that we set a mark at 2400 for the minimal distance, but shouldn't there be cases where the spacing between control joint be closer than 2400?
Well, unfortunately, that is typically what we call it as the minimal, and most people don't even watch that. they go larger than that. I agree with you, and I think there's still some deliberation on something very similar, and that's the porcelain panels. I think, with the porcelain panels, these are large, huge pieces of glass, basically being, large porcelain, and you pretty well should be putting almost a control joint, a soft joint rather than a grouted joint in almost every single joint with that product. And when you use epoxy, like you're talking about, epoxy is a super hard plastic. It's stronger than the tile in most cases. So, you're not going to get any movement whatsoever, any movement allowance at all. So I agree with you. I think going at 8 feet, especially depending on the environment, if you got a lot of skylight coming in, if it's near an entranceway, if you got a lot of vehicular traffic going across it, which I would imagine not happening in a mosaic, but we had it in a mall in Vancouver where they did mosaic in a mall in super high traffic area, and it didn't last very long. But it's something that maybe we should consider, maybe have there a little note, that for, a situation like that a higher frequency of movement joints, control joints in your case, should be considered, and we could probably, I know the guys that work on the porcelain panel standards. Noah Chitty was the one that was the chairman for the interior, and the exterior was Jeff, I forget his last name, works with Noah at Crossville. And I know they were very concerned about the recommendations on movement joints. And it's different scenario and product, but similar concerns.
Thank you.
Okay, I think this concludes our seminar. There are no more questions. I would like to thank you, Dale, for all your time today, and thank you everybody who participated, and hope to see you all back at our next session.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody who's still with us. I know it was only supposed to be an hour, but maybe in future, Violetta, we probably need to allocate an hour and a half.
Yes, we will. Yeah.
So that questions like this. Yeah.
Thanks all. Good to see everybody.
Good to see everybody.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Dale.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dale.
Yep. See you, Owen.
Hey, see everybody.
Yeah. So Violetta, you want to sit for a second? Maybe we compare notes a little bit. I thought it went well.